I see Mr. Barrow over there. He's a member who's not going to be here next year. His state's the peach state. Do we have a ban on exports of peaches? Yes or no? Okay, we got Mr. McKinley up here, who's a coal state. Do we have a ban on the export of coal? No. We got Ms. Capps from California. Do we have a ban on the export of movies? I think so. We've got Mr. Pompeo and Mr. Terry from the corn states. Do we have a ban on the export of corn? No. Yeah. I was saving that for last, Mr. Chairman. My point is that in a free market economy like the United States, there are almost no commodities or products that we have a ban on. We are the free market nation in the world. Now, as has been pointed out, in the 1970s, the OPEC cartel banned exports of crude oil to the United States. And we retaliated by creating the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and also requiring that no crude oil, with few exceptions, could be exported from the United States. That made some economic sense and some strategic sense in the 1970s. But this isn't the 1970s. Now, the key question, or one of the key questions, the chairman of the subcommittee has already asked. You know, what would happen if we repealed the ban? What would happen to domestic gasoline prices? I haven't seen any study that says they would go up. And, you know, the reverse question would be, what would happen if we don't? What happens to domestic oil production in the near term, the midterm, and the long term if we keep the ban in place? Now, the key issue there is the market for domestic crude oil. U.S. refinery capacity, I think, is around 12 million barrels a day. Is that correct, Mr. Szymanski?
If you add in all of the other things, domestic crude oil is getting close to 9 million barrels a day, and you get to 12 by adding in biofuels. And
no, I'm asking what the refinery capacity is. The U.S.
Over 16 million barrels a day.
It's over 16.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I didn't think it was that high. My point was going to be, if we don't have a market in the United States for the crude oil at our refineries, if you can't export it, you keep it in the ground. But if it's 16 million barrels, then we can increase domestic supply fairly significantly, and we just freeze out or push out imports from overseas. And wouldn't that be correct?
You raise an interesting point, Congressman. Many people look at the growth in domestic production and the flatness in demand, and they envision a world where the U.S. is not importing any oil. But in fact, the U.S. may continue to import oil simply to refine it in our very efficient refining system and sell those products back out into the global markets.
Well, Mexico is finally freeing up their oil economy, and if they follow through with their constitutional change, you'll see a large number of U.S. producers in exploration going down to Mexico, and I would assume that there would be additional oil in Mexico that could come up to the United States in the next 5 to 6 years. Plus, we've got Canada, and I know there's some issues on the environmental front with the Canadian heavy oil. I guess I only have 22 seconds. If I had to look at this panel and you had to vote yes or no on repealing the ban, I think I have 3 yeses and a maybe. I'm going to ask Ms. Gordon. I didn't sense that the Carnegie Institute is totally opposed to repealing the ban. I think your concern is transparency and information for environmental purposes. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we have a reprieve here because demand has really cooled off globally. So there's not much of a place to put a lot of oil right now, and that gives time to do the due diligence that has to happen with information so that we have a better sense of what's going to happen when we do change policy someday. Because I do think we're headed toward more open markets, I mean, in general. But do remember, I just should add, the oil market is one of the least efficient markets. There are so many reasons: barriers to entry, barriers to exit, not enough information, externalities. There's far more efficiency in peach markets than in oil markets. So it's a big question.
But could I ask one more question? Is it possible for these lighter shale oils that are being produced in the Eagle Ford and up in North Dakota to be exported as refined products because they are so light and almost need no refining?
They're really different from each other. The Bakken oil is like Nigerian crude. In fact, we've backed out a lot of Nigerian crude since we've been producing in the Bakken. So if we export Bakken, we're probably going to have implications for Nigeria and the North Sea because that's what the oil's like. The Eagle Ford's really unusual. It's much, much lighter, and it needs to have the condensates stripped out of it. So even within the light tight oil category, there's a lot of diversity here that we don't have a lot of information about.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.